What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the final race day updates video of the 2024 season. There's a lot to talk about today. We have a huge amount of 250 injuries. We have a lot of cool storylines going on. There's a lot to talk about with the track and a lot of other stuff, so let's just get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be our injury updates. Starting in the 250 class, there's about 7 or so guys we got to talk about. And with that being said, there's only 23 entries into the class, so if anyone gets hurt or is not able to start in the night show, it's basically going to be a boat ride into the main event. So that is really unfortunate and kind of interesting to see. But the injury updates in the 250 class, we're going to start off with Nate Thrasher. So unfortunately, Nate Thrasher will not be able to compete with us this weekend. He has a hematoma in his leg. Jalik Swoll is still out with his concussion. Dylan Schwartz has unfortunately had a lot of issues with his wrist, getting infected and things like that. He's going to have multiple surgeries to correct that, and he will not be able to compete either. Carson Mumford, after that great burst of speed that we saw in the first round, unfortunately had a compound fracture at the second round, so he will obviously not be with us this weekend either. Casey Cochran is still banged up. His arm and his knee are both pretty messed up, so he is going to be out. And then unfortunately, RJ Hampshire had another get off at the last round. So he has a concussion and he's pretty banged up as well. He will not be able to compete either. And then the last guy in the 250 class that we got to talk about, unfortunately, Chance Hymas is going to be out. He's going to have surgery, get his ACL reconstructed. Now, I did try to voice my concerns regarding this all season long speed, but I am still really concerned about him riding on that torn ACL. Really concerned about his knee having that torn ACL. We'll win this weekend, but I am still really concerned about his torn ACL. Definitely needs to be careful with that knee. Try not to dab his leg in any of the corners. Personally, I was really concerned about his knee, so I'm glad that his ACL is still doing okay to where he was before he was injured. However, he's still riding with that torn ACL, so he's pretty banged up and really take a beating. He's been racing with a torn ACL all season long, but I'm concerned about his ACL. He has a torn ACL. He's racing with the torn ACL. He's been racing with the torn ACL pretty much all season. I'm concerned. I don't know why it's not being talked about more. People are saying, oh, he could be a top 5 guy, this, that. But realistically, I don't know why he's even out there. I think he needs to get it repaired. He's still young, and I feel like he's wasting his time going out there with a bum knee, just waiting to blow up, and then he's going to end up having to have surgery then. I know it's frustrating because he just came back from another torn ACL, but I know it's tempting to just try to get out there and get some results, but I'm really concerned that he's just going to go out there, dab his knee one time, and that's going to be it for his season, and it's going to be even more frustrating. But I wish Chance all the best. I think he could get in there. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to sit on the sidelines and try to make decisions when it's not my career or job on the line. But at the same time, I was pretty amazed at how little concern there was for the longevity of Chance's career with him racing with that torn ACL, knowing that it is going to have to be reconstructed at some point. I really did wonder why they didn't just go ahead and get it reconstructed at the start of the year. That way he could come back in 2025 healthy with a fresh start. Well, now it seems like the start of 2025 is probably going to be in question for him. The start of Supercross is looming. Even the East Coast Supercross is seemingly a little bit too close for him to be able to make at this point. Now, obviously, he is a very gritty rider, and I wouldn't count him out of anything, but some really unfortunate circumstances surrounding this whole thing. He will not be able to compete for Team USA at Motocross of Nations now. Cooper Webb will be going in his place, interestingly enough. So definitely not something I'm proud to be right on, but at the same time, I am a little bit surprised that it wasn't talked about more. Moving on to the 450 class injury updates. Thankfully, the list is a little bit shorter here. So Justin Cooper did end up breaking his collarbone, but he is on the entry list for this weekend. So really interesting to see that. Sounds like it wasn't a very drastic break, and it is going to be looking like he's going to try to tough it out this weekend. And then Derek Kelly is going to be out. He went down pretty hard, and he's generally banged up. Nothing really broken or seriously damaged, but he's a little bit too sore to get out there and race this weekend. Moving on to our 250 top contenders. At the top with a perfect score, we have Hayden Deegan. So Hayden came in as the number 1 seed, and he has not lost a moto yet. So he has amassed a perfect score of 100 points going in, and he is 19 points ahead of second place Tom Vial. So he has definitely put himself in a good position here. He still could technically lose the title, especially with it being triple points. There's still 75 points up for grab this weekend alone. So definitely possible for him to lose the title. But with the way he's been riding, even with a bad start, that's not going to be enough to keep him from winning the title. He's really going to need to crash or have a mechanical or something really interfere with him. And even with that, a solid other moto could still keep him in contention for the overall championship. So at this point, it's really hard to bet against Hayden taking the overall win. And it feels like he's really earned it at this point. So shout out to him on a great season. And then, as I just said, in second, we have Tom Vial. So Tom is 19 points behind him. He definitely has the best chance at beating Hayden this weekend, but it's definitely not much of a chance. So behind him in third, we have Levi Kitchen, who's only 3 points behind Tom Vial, so really nothing there. It's going to be interesting to see who can bring home that second place overall. Definitely going to be a good battle between those guys. Then in fourth, we have my favorite to do really well this weekend, and that is Joe Shimoda. So Joe is only 2 points behind Levi, still well within striking distance of that second overall, and definitely still mathematically within reach of taking home the championship. But again, probably not going to happen for him. Now, he was in the title fight with Hayden last year, and he did technically have a shot at it. We saw him uncharacteristically going for Hayden's front wheel at the final round of SMX last year. So these guys definitely know what's on the line. And I definitely expect Joe to move up at least 1 or 2 positions this weekend in the overall standings. He's only a few points behind Tom Vial and 2 points behind Levi. He's been coming on strong, and even with that broken collarbone at the end of motocross, he still came out swinging in SMX, which is usually around the time that we see Joe coming on strong at the end of the season. So look for Joe to do really well this weekend. And then in fifth, we have Julien Beaumer, who has been riding exceptionally well when compared to the rest of the season. He did come out really strong right out of the gate at Anaheim 1, and we never really saw that again until we got back to SMX this year. So while he is in fifth, he is 31 points behind Hayden Deegan, so definitely in his own little section here in fifth, pretty well outside the top 4 guys, but he is also relatively far ahead of Jordan Smith, who's in sixth, and he is 5 points behind Julien Beaumer. So Julien definitely has a good chance of bringing home a top 5 overall in the championship, and that is still a substantial amount of money, especially when you're a rookie. So really good to see that out of Julien. Gonna have to keep it solid. There is triple points, so a lot could change this weekend, and he is in that group of guys that tend to fluctuate quite a bit. So keep an eye on him. If he can get a good start, he should be able to finish in the top 5 overall. And then, as I had mentioned, we have Jordan Smith in 6th overall, and that's actually the same position he was in going into the finals last year. And after he ended up winning Moto number 1 at the finals, he was in position to end up winning the whole thing. Now, the points were tighter last season, and he did end up winning Moto number 1. All he had to do was get 3rd in Moto number 2, and he actually would have been your SMX champion. So we could definitely be looking at Jordan in a totally different light if he did not go down in that second moto last season. But unfortunately for him, he did. Now he is coming in 6th overall this season once again. But as I mentioned, he is a lot further back as far as the points gap itself. So he is 36 points behind Hayden, 5 points behind Julien Beaumer. Definitely could move up a few spots, but definitely a pretty good distance back as well. Behind Jordan in 7th, we have Pierce Brown, who's quietly been riding rock solid all season long, hasn't really had any podiums, hasn't been very far outside the top 5, and that just goes to show with him right here in 7th. Now he is 8 points behind Jordan, so definitely a significant gap, but again, nothing that he can't gain with the triple points. He definitely could get in there in the top 5 or so, so keep an eye on Pierce if he can get a good start. He could be one of those guys towards the front as well. Another thing worth noting with Pierce is this is the last time we'll be ever seeing him on a gas. He will be going to Star Yamaha next season. So realistically, this will be the last time that he probably rides an Austrian bike, and he'll be on Yamaha after this race. Then behind him, we have his new future teammate in Max Anstey. So Max is 7 points behind Pierce. We saw him switch to Star Yamaha in the middle of the motocross season, and it seems like things have been kind of up and down for him. He's had some pretty good moments and he's been on the ground a few times. So it'll be interesting to see how he can finish off here. Then behind him, we have one of my personal favorite riders in Ty Masterpool. So we've seen Ty have the speed in qualifying and also get off to some really good starts, but it seems like he struggles, especially on the hard packed tracks, with knowing how hard to push it. And he seems to lose the front end or just lose traction and end up going down. We saw that last weekend, so hopefully we won't see that again this weekend. Should be similar track conditions with it being relatively warm and the track most likely being baked throughout the day. But the good news is it is a night race this time, so hopefully that will help the dirt be a little bit more loose throughout the day and have a little bit extra traction. And then the last guy that we have that we're going to talk about in the 250 class is going to be his teammate, Cameron McAdoo. So even though Cameron's had to go through the LCQ each of the rounds so far, he's been able to get off to some relatively good starts, which has been pretty impressive, especially with how short the start straight was last weekend. This weekend, we are going back to another split start, which could play to his advantage with having to come through the LCQ and not having great gate choice. But another thing that's going to play to his advantage is, even though he is coming through the LCQ, so many guys are out now that they're taking, 7 or 8 riders from the LCQ, so that if he's able to win that race, then that does allow him to move a lot further up in gate selection than he would have initially when there was only 2 riders in the LCQ. But either way, he's been able to move up the point standings quite a bit. He's already made it into the top 10, and he's only 1 point behind his teammate Ty Masterpool. So with another solid finish this weekend, he could definitely vault well within the top 10, and maybe he could even get in the top 5. Moving on to the 450 class, surprisingly, in my opinion, at the top, we have Hunter Lawrence. So shout out to this man. He definitely cannot be counted out. He's going into the final round with the red plate. Now he is only 1 point ahead of Chase Sexton, so definitely not a lot there. And he's only a few points ahead of his brother, Jet Lawrence. So if any of those 3 guys end up winning, they will be your SMX champion in the 450 class. Quite the contrast to the 250 class, where it feels like nobody can beat Hayden Deegan no matter what happens. Whereas if any of those 3 guys win, they will be your champion. And then in 4th, we have Eli Tomac, who is 21 points back. But at the end of the day, it could still be reasonably possible for him to win the championship. Now, obviously, none of those 3 guys could really finish in second behind Eli, but that's not totally outside the realm of possibilities when you have guys like Ken Roczen and Cooper Webb and maybe even Aaron Plessinger, who could potentially get in that second and third position behind Eli if he was able to win, and those guys had some catastrophic mistakes. Technically, Eli is not out of it, but realistically, he is relatively out of it. It's probably going to come down to the first 3. And then in 5th, behind Eli, we have Aaron Plessinger, who has had an up and down SMX season. He did end up going down in a practice start at the first round, and he ended up hurting his shoulder pretty bad. He is pushing through it, and he is trying to stay healthy, especially with Motocross of Nations coming up. But at the same time, he's going to try to hold on to this top 5 in the championship standings. There is a lot of money on the line, and as of right now, he's able to do that. Then behind him, we have Ken Roczen. So Ken's only 4 points behind AP, and he's also tied with Cooper Webb. So both of those guys are knocking on the door of trying to pass Aaron Plessinger. If Aaron does miss a step this weekend, he could find himself falling pretty significantly far back in the standings, and both Ken Roczen and Cooper Webb are definitely capable riders. The next rider up behind them is going to be Dylan Ferrandis. So Dylan Ferrandis is 7 points behind them. He definitely has his work cut out for him if he wants to move up in the standings, but it's definitely possible. He's pretty much locked into a top 10 finish overall. So shout out to Dylan. I do have to wonder if it's going to be the last time we see him racing professionally. Haven't heard much about where he's going to go next season, but we did hear at the end of last year that he was talking about retiring when he didn't necessarily have a ride figured out. And the fact that he doesn't have a ride figured out and it hasn't been announced, I have to wonder, is this the last time we see Dylan race? Definitely seems like it's in the cards. Not sure why it's not being talked about more. I would really like to know what he's doing, so that way if this is the last time we ever see him, that we could at least appreciate it. Obviously, he hasn't been setting the world on fire, but at the same time, he's still well within the top 10 in the Premier class, and that does command some respect. So either way, shout out to Dylan on a relatively solid season. Hope to see you next season. Next rider up is going to be Malcolm Stewart. Now, Malcolm is only 3 points behind Dylan Ferrandis, and he was laying down some absolute heaters in the timed practice on Friday. So keep an eye on Malcolm. He could be one to watch. He's been coming on strong lately, and with these guys being banged up and Malcolm starting to come around, he could be a real contender to start to move up towards that top 5 overall in the standings. And there's some real money on the line if he's able to move up even just a few spots. And then tied with him, rounding out your top 10, we have Jason Anderson. So not the best way to end the season that we were hoping for Jason Anderson. He's been here all season long, so that's really great to see. And he has had some moments that were good, but nothing great like we saw a couple seasons back where he was winning multiple supercrosses and he was always on the podium in motocross. Now, obviously, the field has gotten deeper since then, so definitely not counting Jason out. He's still in the top 10. Hopefully, he can turn things a little bit around next season, and it's going to be interesting to see how he does when he gets his new teammate in Jorge Prado. Next, I just want to talk about the 250 All-Star class that we're going to be seeing this weekend. So this is kind of taking place of what used to be at the Monster Energy Cup, and we did get to see a lot of the top riders that we have now in the pro classes come through that All-Star race. We saw guys like Adam Cianciarulo, Austin Faulkner, and those types of guys go through and really dominate the class back then, and they ended up being relatively successful riders. Obviously, those two that I just named have had their adversity, but my point still stands that keep an eye on that class. If there are any true standouts in the class this weekend, then maybe those could be the riders of the future. So that should be a lot of fun to watch. And then the final thing that I want to go ahead and do for you guys is pull up the track map, and we're going to break down this track a little bit further. So let's get into that. All right, so the first thing we need to get established for you guys is exactly what's going on with this track. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the middle here. There's some other pretty cool things I want to talk about. So let's get the layout all figured out. So here we have a raised split start. So interesting to see that. They're going to come off of the start like this, and they're going to merge together right here. I definitely prefer this more than the split start merge we had at the first round into the first true rhythm section here. So there is two pretty big quads that are potential right here, where you go table over 2 rollers, and then once again table over 2 more rollers. Definitely some time to be saved there if you can hit that line. Then you have this gnarly big double out of the corner into a higher speed section here, but this does act as a bit of a speed check coming through this winding section here. Going to be interesting to see how well this will be illuminated, because this is well off the beaten path as far as the traditional lighting for the drag strip. Into this sand section here, could be some tricky shadows in there, again with the lighting, winding your way through into this hip jump over to the finish line, and then around another potential split section here. And then this is a little bit of a slower section. They're rolling and doubling through here. Nice big bull turn here. And then this is where things get a little bit confusing. You're going to come back onto the start straight. Then you're going to cross over the start straight back onto the other start straight. Cross over to this berm here. Really interesting split berm that they built up right there. Back across the start straight once again. Into these jumps here. Through the rollers. And then once again, you're going to come back across and then tie back in with the track. Now I want to go ahead and look at the track from this other angle here to offer some better perspective. So again, right here at the start, you do have a raised start. It's not very dramatic of a raised start, just a few feet, but it is going to be interesting to see how the guys can get off of the start, especially with it being a grate and then having a drop right off the start. You're going to have a lot of really good traction off the start, followed by the track going away from you. So really going to be interesting to see how much you can focus on getting the jump versus holding yourself back so you can keep your wheels on the ground and then get a good drive down the hill. Now, if we zoom in on this back rhythm section right here, again, what I was trying to say was that these guys can potentially go table over these 2 rollers and then again table over 2 rollers to do essentially a quad out. But one thing I want to note is that right here, there's actually 2 rollers in front of the tabletop. So pretty good rhythm section they got going back there. Another thing I just want to point out is that if you look right here, you have the traditional lighting for the drag strip. Now, obviously, they are going to bring in temporary lighting. You do already see some in this area back here. So I'm sure they're going to definitely make a good effort to get the track illuminated. But again, with how fast these guys could potentially be going through here and the fact that it's going to have secondary lighting, could be pretty challenging. Probably going to see one or two guys go down due to shadows or just not being able to see the track clearly. So one other thing I want to just make note of real quick is that the last passing point that you're going to have on the track, in my opinion, is going to be either this sand section here or maybe this last turn right here that has this little split section in it. It's going to be really tough to make anything else happen after that, as these guys are going to come into this hip jump and then pretty much just go straight for the finish line. Really going to be hard, say if you're trying to make a pass and this guy's hugging the inside, to come around the outside of him and still make the pass in time for the finish line. So a little bit disappointed to see that type of approach to the finish line. It would be cool to at least see a straightaway and a drag race or a bull turn right before the finish line for those last ditch efforts. But definitely overall pretty excited with this track design. Definitely my favorite out of the three that we've had so far. I'm not mad about it. Definitely looking forward to the racing tonight. Let me know what you guys think about the track, and let me know who you think is going to be the winner for the overall and tonight. Obviously, Hayden Deegan does seem to have a pretty good stranglehold on the 250 side, but what are your thoughts on the 450 class? Who do you think is going to take it home? I really appreciate you guys coming alongside with me as I build this channel. As we move more towards the off season, I'm going to continue to keep the updates rolling for you guys as far as team changes, any other injury updates that come out. And as we head into the 2025 season, I will keep you guys all up to date. I'm also going to keep the story videos coming out. I have a really cool one in the works right now. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and check out the Jason Lawrence or Austin Faulkner stories that we have up on the profile. There's a playlist, or you could just search them up. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.